This is the Buckeye Broadcast. I'm your Buckeye brother, Doug Daniels. Thanks for being with me on your Tuesday or your Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever you have the time to catch up with me and me with you. It's beautiful, man. Appreciate it. Subscribe, like, put your comments below. Tell a friend or two that there's an Ohio State fan who doesn't pretend to be anything other than that, doing some pretty good stuff, because I'm a 43-year broadcast veteran of radio, and this is my first foray really into video. So far, so good. We call it the Brother Buckeye Broadcast because I don't believe in podcast. I'm a broadcaster, and anybody who's got access to YouTube anywhere on the planet can listen. I call that broad, not pod. It's just not the podcast, that's for sure. But I digress, as Tim May would say. So, by the way, in my picks last week, the last program I did was the picks, and I was right 52 times. I picked 44 winners, 8 losers, and one of the losers was one that I really shouldn't count because I picked LSU knowing that FSU was going to win, and I only did that to appease my boss who's from Baton Rouge. So I really should have been 41-6, but I digress. All right, let's talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm not nearly as down and disappointed as some of the people on the sites that I go to, like 11 Warriors and Bucknuts 24/7 Ohio State, where I'm Radio 1979. I give Kyle McCord a grade B, and this is why I'm giving him a B. I thought he did what he was asked to do and performed okay considering the mediocre line play. If the line play had been better and he'd been asked to do more, I think he would have done more. But there's room for improvement because that B is not a B plus or an A minus or an A or an A plus. It's a B. A wide receiver grade also gets a B. The line and QB play directly affect what happens with the wideouts, of course. Those who were there said the wide receiver blocking was poor, just as it was for the offensive line at times. So they get a B. They don't get a pass, no pun intended, because McCord was starting his second game, and wasn't exactly hitting them in stride. The wideouts have got to do their part, especially when they knew the offensive line was struggling. They should have been getting open earlier, if possible. So they get a grade B as well. I thought the running backs get a B plus. Saw some good things from Henderson, Williams, and Trainum, especially Trainum. So I'm okay, again, considering how iffy the offensive line play was. The tight ends get an A. I'm giving the tight ends an A because K. Stover and G. Scott played well. They blocked well, and most of the time, and they caught some passes and did some good things. The offensive line gets I'm going to say a C minus. A C minus. I could have gone with a D or a D plus. I'm going to go with the C minus. Lots of improvement and time to do that with Youngstown State and Western Kentucky next. Regarding the defense generally an A all across the board. Defensive line, defensive end, linebackers, safeties, and corners all did their jobs, in my view, against a funky Indiana offense. Apparently, BTN knew that Indiana was practicing the triple option. Ohio State did not. So considering it was a curveball, I think they did hit the curve pretty well there, giving up only 3 points, and it was a doink that went in to ruin the shutout. Special teams receive an A as well. Fielding made his kicks, and coverage on punts and kickoffs were above average. So an A. So the biggest issue really was the offensive line. Second issue, I would say, quarterback play. But then again, I wasn't all that thrilled by the wide receivers either. I think they need to step it up as well. 23 points is not enough. They're playing the flightless birds of Youngstown State, but doubling that score is not going to be enough. If Ohio State scores 46 and wins 46-3 or 46-0, I won't be satisfied. I think they need to triple the score. Now, I could be stupid, and I've been called that more than once, but I would prefer a 69-13 score than a 46 to 19 or 46 to 9 kind of score. Now, the Penguins did beat Valparaiso 52-10, so they do have some skilled players on O. And so let me split the difference between 46 and 69. How about 54? So 54-0, 54-3, 54-10 would be okay, but not tremendous. Not tremendous. Ryan Day's press conference was earlier Tuesday. Based on the questions that were asked, he said the run game was only 50% efficient on first down. Again, that's an offensive line situation. Also blocking from the tight ends and the receivers, too, play a part in that. He says that the offense needs to execute better and stay on schedule. They were behind the chains a little bit more than they should have been by not getting what they needed to get on those first and second downs. And some of the short yardage play situations that we've seen over the last 2 years still looks like a problem, even with those jumbo sets. Wasn't great. Only had 10 possessions in the ball game. Usually Ohio State gets 13. They must be more proficient and make the most out of those 10 possessions. But again, Indiana was not controlling the ball, but they weren't passing the ball, which means there weren't incomplete passes, and the clock wasn't stopping. And the clock doesn't stop anymore. It's just like the NFL, except for when there are incomplete passes and timeouts, except for the last 2 minutes of each half. So 10 fewer possessions. I think possessions. Ohio State had in the plays, I think somewhere in the 60s, and they're usually into the 80s and 90s. So we'll circle back around to that because that also played a part in who you didn't see on Saturday in Bloomington, or who you didn't think you saw enough of. The focus is on execution, Day said in the presser. About Harrison's targets, he got 8. That's probably still not enough. Caught 2 passes. Weren't there like 2 touchdowns that were called back? Once when he stepped out and once when there was a penalty. Anyway, Day says they need to find more creative ways to get him the ball. That is just sacrilege. It's blasphemy for the best player in college football to get essentially 2 touches. Because, if he doesn't catch the ball, if you don't get it to him, it's not a touch. 2 touches can't happen. Can't happen. Kyle asked how he thought he did, asked Ryan Day how he thought he did, and he offered how he thought he did. They were basically both on the same page. Day wished that both QBs got more snaps. It was good enough to win the game, and that is the objective, but there's lots of work to do. He likes having Sonny Styles on the field a lot in different positions. But again, he wasn't on the field quite as much as we would have thought because, again, Indiana and Ohio State only had so many possessions, and there was a lot of running in the game, and the clock was running. Day said that he learned some things on Saturday and will adjust accordingly, may have to cut back on the sheer number of things they tried to do Saturday going forward. Accentuate the things that were going well, work on the things that weren't going well in practice, and maybe trying to implement them. But I think they had too many ornaments on the tree. You may have thought it was conservative. I'm not so sure. They were certainly not aggressive in throwing the ball downfield, but I got the impression that they were trying to do lots of different sets and cutesy things. And again, maybe too many ornaments on the tree. Also, Day said he needs the offensive line needs to draw a line in the sand and move people on those 3rd and 4th downs. 3rd and 4th short. he sounds pretty stubborn, and he was stubborn last year at times. Running that Northwestern game reminds me of times when he just kept running right at these guys, thinking that he was going to impose their will. But it doesn't have anything to do with will when the team on the other side has 2 or 3 more people than you do. I heard a comment that one of the folks that comment on the offense on one of the sites that I watch said that there were times when they should have had a couple of wide receivers out wide just to get those cornerbacks away from the line of scrimmage. Kyle is the starter this week versus YSU. The goal is to have the best QB room in the country. Devin Brown will play more, and there will be an evaluation made. But if anybody thinks that anyone other than Kyle McCord is going to be your starter unless Kyle gets hurt or just looks horrendous at Notre Dame, you got another thing coming. The art of coaching, trust over time. That's how Coach Day answered the question about how aggressive the offense should be. Meaning he was as aggressive as he thought he could be under the circumstances and situations in that Indiana game. He seems to think he did okay, is what I took from the art of coaching and trust over time. Over time, he will trust the players to execute his play calls better than they did. But the objective, one, is to win the game. I turned the page. Doo-doo-doo. Day loves Chip Trainum's versatility. He can run, catch, and block. He's big and strong. Day is very excited about him. What do you do with this guy who is clearly more efficient than the other two? I'm not saying that Chip Trainum is a better running back, but there's a little bit of Nick Chubb in Chip Trainum. He's surprisingly fast and swift for his size. He's got quick feet. He's not going to be taken down with an arm tackle. I think he's got an NFL future, which might be as brighter than Travion Henderson. Henderson's definitely, and Trainum's got the home run ability too, like a Nick Chubb. That's who he reminds me of. But what do you do about a player who wanted to play running back, who you would not recruit as a running back? You recruited him as a linebacker, so he went to Arizona State. He came back to Ohio State because you said he could play linebacker, and he said he would play linebacker. Now, he had to play running back at the end of last year. But really, is he the third best running back on the Ohio State football team? There's a lot of Braylon Allen in Chip Trainum. But how do you demote Travion Henderson, freshman All-American, to second team, and Mayan Williams, who came back, to third team? It's a nice problem to have. All right, G. Scott moved from wide receiver to tight end a couple of years ago. Day says he knew it would be a 2-year investment, and it's starting to pay off. He played some snaps. He'd like to see him play more. He works hard and deserves to be on the field, which is why he was. Asked when you will start taking more downfield shots, Day says the offense has to execute in the run game first in order to let it loose. That's what he said. That's sort of an old school philosophy, set up the pass game with the run game. In the modern era of college football, certainly Day kind of offenses usually throw the ball to set up the run. Maybe that hasn't been working as well as it had at one time. So maybe he's kind of going back to the days of yore when you ran the ball to set up the pass. That seems to be what he's saying, at least in today's press conference. A reporter asked a stupid question about 2 FCS schools being on the schedule next. Of course, YSU is that what we used to call the 1AA. Western Kentucky is not. Some people need to just retire already. Day called him out, and I am too. Day said it's about us, not the opponent. Week one. What did I write here? I must admit, week 1, top week 2 is where between week 1 and week 2 is where you see the most improvement. It's an old cliche. It better be true. It has to be true. You might not be able to tell versus YSU, unless the score ends up being 46-6. Then I can say, not a lot of improvement against the one FCS school on the schedule. Day went on to say, when we play complimentary football, we can be as good as anyone. I hate that cliche, complimentary football, but we'll let it ride this time. Day said that both QBs need more reps for the game to slow down. More reps in practice, more opportunities in games. So thankfully, there are 2 games for both these QBs to get those reps for things to slow down for them both. There were things that happened that he did not expect to see, and some things which he didn't see that he thought he would. Did you follow that? There were some disappointing things that he saw, and there were some good things that he expected that he didn't see. Probably a lot to do with the offensive line. His tone, again, seemed to suggest that that quote was more about than hey. Day said that what you see on film is what you are. They will make corrections based on what they see on film. There's a lot to see and to remedy. Does Youngstown State do something which will prepare the team for future games? He really didn't seem to answer that one with anything worth sharing with you. He just says that the team needs to match the intensity of the opponent. I'm not sure what kind of intensity Youngstown State is going to offer. But so really, boy, has that been happening all the way through this thing? Have I been doing this all the way through? When I watch this back, if I see that too many times, I'm going to redo this. And you wouldn't know it because you wouldn't see this. Yikes. Oh, it's very late in the evening. Okay, what else did Ryan Day have to say? Oh, so Bob Allen Kennedy, was a friend of mine. I worked with him at WDLR back in the early 80s. Bobby Kennedy was the longtime PA announcer at the basketball and football games. The reporter asked about Bobby's legacy. I got the feeling that Dave maybe didn't know him very well. If you knew Bobby, you knew Bobby. Bobby was a bowling ball of a human being. He was probably no taller than 5'5" or 6". He was the round mound of Buckeye Sound. And not only did he do the Buckeye games, but he did Otterbein. He probably did some, whether it was high school football, professional, college. Bobby worked a lot, and he had a lot of health problems. He had health problems when I knew him back in 1983. But Day did say that Saturdays will be different, and he respects Bobby's legacy. In regards to Jihad Carter, apparently something was going on. Ryan Day said that he hopes to see him play more this week. Apparently he didn't play at all last week. Jim Knowles' comment about Jihad Carter made it sound as if he was in the doghouse or injured. We'll get to that later. In regards to Xavier Johnson and the reduction in plays, he said the reason that you didn't see a lot of Xavier was because there were only 10 possessions and there weren't a lot of plays. And Yeah, you had Harrison, you had Emeka, you had Fleming, who had a very good game. And they got Carnell Tate in there quite a bit. So Xavier looks like he's receiver 5. And because the game was fairly close, 23-3, they just didn't get him in much. In regards to Josh Proctor starting, a bit of a surprise. Day says he's been more consistent in practice. He needs to be a major contributor this year. No one has ever questioned his effort. Josh has earned the right to be the starter. Well, again, we'll circle back around with Knowles' thoughts as well here in a few minutes. Cade was open because he was being single coverage. That's why McCord went to him so often, because he was open. Pretty simple. Cade is working on separation, route running, and playing big. He wants to be... Now, Day didn't say this, but my thought is that Cade Stover wants to be a tight end Ohio State will remember, an all Big Ten quality tight end, and he's off to a good start. Josh Fryer graded out champion. He's the right tackle on the offensive line. Nobody else did. Simmons needs to be more consistent on the left side. That was also his story at San Diego State last year. About the 12, 13, and 22 packages, those are the jumbo packages to help out the run game. Some were successful, some were not. More work to do there. On the offensive line, all the problems are correctable. They just need better execution. He would not say that it's a player personnel problem. PPP. He thought Carson Hinsman's first game at center was fine for being his first game and being on the road versus a conference opponent. He did not grade out champion, though. How short is the leash Kyle McCord was and or is on? This was a Tim May question. Day said, we have plays which are full field progression, meaning one check down, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there are read 1, read 2 plays. Overall, Day said things were pretty well done. Eyes need to be right. The Buckeyes need to be doing the right things to put the players in the best position to win. And that's basically what the 23-3 result was. Last question was about Devin Brown. Kyle is the starter, but Devin will play. Certainly more against Youngstown State. It may become clearer as the season progresses one way or another. But again, unless McCord gets hurt or just flops versus YSU and Western Kentucky, McCord is your starter. Jim Knowles and his thoughts. Ohio State did not prepare for the triple option. I think he joked about the triple option in last week's presser. He said he wasn't prescient, that he was just joking, and that they didn't practice against it. He did feel good about how the players adapted. Players were not happy giving up the 3 points, and isn't surprised he felt that way. Thoughts on Josh Proctor? He played well. He's a talented guy and becoming more consistent. Showed up and played well. Also liked what he saw from Hartford. Again, Jahad Carter did not play. He said it was a tough choice to go with Proctor and Hartford over Carter. I think I may have even added that. I think something else was going on there. Maybe he was still nicked up a little bit. But he did suggest Carter would be playing this week, as did Day. Champions, they don't make those public anymore. They used to do that. In other words, I think it was said that there were a couple dozen players combined that graded out champions. Day mentioned Fryer. Nobody else was mentioned because they're supposedly not supposed to be public this year. We'll see how long that holds. Knowles said that the defense was solid across the board, but there were a couple of third downs that got the defense sort of out of their gaps. And he said the one chunk play was his fault. It was a call that he made. He says that he needs to see more growth. The first game was an anomaly because of the triple option. We'll be seeing traditional offenses going forward. They didn't even get to rush the QB because they just simply didn't drop back to pass that often. Igbinosun loves his aggressiveness and his handsiness. He just needs to remember what that technique is, which allows the handsiness without drawing penalties. But he loves Igbinosa's aggression. My right leg has fallen asleep. It ought to be fun trying to stand up. I'm not going to stand up right now because I have underwear on. All right. Very optimistic about the cornerback room. Staying on top of deep balls is what they need to do. Denzel and Jordan got their hands on some passes. Defensing the cross-country throws. They did good on that, so he was happy. On Cody Simon not playing a lot, it was because of the triple option and just the lack of number of plays. And to not read anything into the fact that still Chambers and Eichenberg were the ones that were mostly out there. He wants to play Sonny more than he's already playing, so look forward to that. He said the game went quickly, so he couldn't play as many guys as he had hoped. On the interior line, they made plays in the run game with no gain, 1 and 2 yard gains, and the tackles were being made by the interior linemen, which is a good sign. Going back to Josh Proctor, he said his strong point is being aggressive. Looking forward to seeing him against passing teams. Knowles added there are indicators that things are heading in the right direction. They only gave up one explosive play, and he kind of blamed himself on that one. Definitely proud that the defense did their job. It lasted for about 24 hours, and then it's on to the future, YSU. So you have that pride for 24 hours, and it's on to the next opponent. In regards to giving the offense some confidence, knowing that there's a better defense this year, he said, you know what, people on a team, people count on you. Every player is counted on to do their part. Tim May is still a goofball. That was based on him correcting. Is it Jerry Emig? When he said that Tim May from Letterman Row and the Tim May podcast, Tim May corrected him, say it's the Tim May show. Kind of like when I say it's the Brother Buckeye Broadcast and not the Brother Buckeye Podcast. Except for I wouldn't do that in a room full of contemporaries and peers. Knowles says there is no warmth in his heart. Maybe we should start calling him the Grinch. But maybe we shouldn't call him the Grinch, because Ohio State has had a Grinch at defensive coordinator, and that didn't go well. And finally, he said regarding the rotation on the defensive line, did you like the rotation? Michael Hall had 27 snaps, so he played maybe less than half of the Indiana snaps. They want him to stay in there more, but he likes the idea of everybody being fresh. And in a game like that, you can do that. And probably in the next 2, they'll be able to do a lot of rotating and keeping people fresh for the big one, Notre Dame, in a few weeks. So that's this edition of the Brother Buckeye Broadcast. I'm going to do another pick episode where I make the college picks. I mean, after all, I went 44-8, really 45-6, because again, I just threw a bone to my boss. I'm not going to do that again. So we'll do that. I'm going to rate the Big Ten teams, and just do some other things. I think Ohio State got out of that game without any injuries of note, and that's always a positive note to end a game on and to end this broadcast on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the notification bell. If you only knew how late it was right now, I should be sleeping. I should be counting sleep. So anyway, I'm going to go to sleep right now. Make it a great, great Wednesday if you're watching this on Wednesday or whatever day. And I promise this coming weekend, I'm going to do a preview show of Ohio State YSU. I'll definitely do a recap faster than Tuesday. All right? All right. Go Bucks.